Almost makes me cry a little bit here.
Okay, so if you're showing the video, I actually am crying.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon is like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people.
That used to be me, but not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. Warwick runs on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok sometimes. Really happy to have you here again. If you are new to the podcast, or I guess I can't say again, but if you are new to the podcast, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. Today is part 2 of my episode with Carolyn Coffin. I am hopefully back in Norway by the time of this episode coming back. So we're going to get back to more of a normal routine, at least for me. And I'm excited about that. Not much to report on again on my own running because I'm recording all of this on the same day. But enjoy this part 2 of the episode with Carolyn. We are talking about so many interesting things. And I think that this is a bit of a deeper conversation than a lot of the conversations that I've had on the pod. Okay, now we've been talking for an hour, and I would love for us to like touch on the marathon project. I actually want to say that in terms of getting that full recap, people should head over to your podcast and listen to that episode. It was such an amazing episode. Like I told you before we started recording, and I might have mentioned it on the recording already, that it was one of my favorite episodes that I've listened to lately. And it's funny because it's like, if I look back at now the last month or two and the podcast episodes that I've listened to, I would say it's the Marathon Handbook podcast, the Q&A, and yours. They really stood out for me. And it's so easy to tell too, because those are the runs where it just felt like time was flying by and I was just having such a good time. And you know, when the episode is not over and you don't want the episode to, or you don't want to stop listening, so you feel like, oh, I wish I could have kept on running. That's kind of how I felt with both of those. And you were in both of them, and I really enjoyed the segment, like I mentioned with Marathon Handbook, where they were talking about your question there. And like you said, you did not really feel like, well, you had a very crazy travel to to the race in the first place. So there was something there where what John, your husband, he was saying that, but you did have a crazy travel, less sleep, the stressful day, all of that. And you were like, yeah, but so did everyone else. And that is something that I want to like touch on, that everyone did, but also I feel like everything that we talked about here, everyone's also different. You know, you were saying that some people might be able to be vocal about their goals, some might not be. And I think that's the same with that. Like, who knows, maybe you were more stressed out, and you were also saying something about your daughter going somewhere and driving with someone who just got their license. Like, I can't relate to that as a mom, but I know that I'm also a person who I tend to worry more. So like, who knows how much that night beforehand. So you had 2 nights of like stressful events. Maybe your husband was more like, oh, it's gonna be fine, and then he was sleeping through it. You know, it's, those are also different approaches. So without even thinking about the race itself or having a day, you did have an approach that was not ideal, and I don't agree with, but so did everyone else, because everyone deals with that differently. And I'm curious about your take on that when I'm saying that.
Well, I do appreciate you leading into this discussion talking about that, because if I'm being honest, that's the part that still sort of stings the most, I think, from this race, is that yes, we had this crazy travel, and it really was, but the two people that I traveled there with also dealt with the exact same thing. So there's that comparison piece, I think, that's been hard to reconcile. It's like, yeah, but it still was possible to run well on that day. And I'm not one for making excuses,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. So that is something that still is a little bit left undone for me.
Mhm. But I feel like you could, because you can compare to this or this to so many things in life, right? Say you have a family where both parents are addicts and there are three siblings. They grew up in the same house and they had all the same things happening to them. And then one of them might end up being an addict themselves or struggling a lot, right? And at the end of the day, you could say, yeah, but they all grew up with the same. So then he or she shouldn't have. But it's also easy to understand why that third person didn't. So it could be
Right.
that it's not that the other ones were so much better or anything like that. It's just that they had a different, there was something inside of them that made it easier for them to cope with it somehow.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I believe that that is the same with sports, right? Like, because a perfect build up or a perfect setup or a perfect last tapering week will be so different from person to person. Some
Yeah.
people are totally fine with that last workout during tapering week to suck because they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's how it usually is. And then you have other people who are like, oh my God, that was a bad one. I need to do another one on Thursday. I've had people on the podcast who are like, they were not happy with it. So they went on and did a faster workout because they just needed that confirmation. And it still went well because it's like, taper week, you can probably do almost whatever you want as long as you're still tapering in a way.
Hmm. Hmm.
I wouldn't recommend going out for another hard workout just to get that confidence back. But I think that we're all built so differently. So taking that, this situation, three people saying that all of us should react the same way, I don't agree with that. But
Hmm.
I mean, that's just my take on it.
No, and again, I appreciate that because I can certainly relate to that as like a parent, right? I have two children. I feel like we've parented them the same and they could not be more different, and I love them both exactly the same. You know what I mean? So it's easy to understand what you're hinting at with a kind of a more neutral example like
Yeah.
that. And again, I think that's the opportunity for growth always for me is the way that I talk to myself, self compassion,
Hmm.
sort of working with that inner critic uh, that's sort of been with me for as long as I can remember, for
Yeah.
sure. And I maybe tell myself like that's why I've achieved some of the things I have, but and maybe that's true, but also it might be time for an update, a
Hmm.
software update.
Yeah. But I also wanna. I actually took a screenshot of one of your posts that you wrote uh, before the marathon project, which I loved reading now after. So it's like, dear Carolyn, whatever unfolds on December 20th, remember this: you already won. You showed up for yourself day after day through cold mornings, heavy legs, big workouts, and even bigger doubts. You stacked the miles. You lifted the weights, fueled like a pro, and slept like it was your superpower. You did everything that was within your control, and that kind of effort changes a person in all the best ways. The marathon can't take that from you, no matter what the clock says. You are ready. You've already done the hard part. Now go out there and enjoy the victory laps. Almost makes me cry a little bit here.
Okay, so if you're showing the video, I actually am crying.
but I think that I was like, I was reading that and I was like, I really hope she goes back and looks at that, because I'm sure you wrote that thinking that, but it's also going to be a great race, you know. Um, but this is what it's all about. Like I've talked about this or to other guests or with other guests on the podcast too, that sometimes it's not always about that end result that you get. At least for me, I'm like, over the holidays now, I was so proud of just getting out there because there were so many days where I was like, oh, my family is at home, they're drinking coffee, just chilling. I have to go out on this run in windy London, and I ran the same route every day. I got so tired of that route, but I was just so happy to go out there. But reading what you wrote there, it's like you're describing the marathon, you're describing yourself as a person, the achievements, and honestly, you didn't have to run the marathon to still be that person, right? Like the one that you described there. And this also brings me to like this emotion. Like you got emotional, I got a bit emotional over here, and that's also what you did on the podcast, like your podcast. When you did this, you got pretty emotional about all of it. Um, and personally, I love that, and I want to ask you more about like that specifically. But listening, like talking about it yourself, listening to these things, are you able to kind of appreciate that as well as still being disappointed that you didn't have the best race?
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think when you reached out and said, I like that episode, and I said, if you don't mind, like what did you like most about it? And you said, I liked the part that you got emotional. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because that's the part I'm having the hangover, the vulnerability hangover about, is the part that I got emotional. And trust me, if I didn't become overcome with emotion, like I would prefer that. I hate, like, I don't want to use the word hate. I have never been able to fully embrace that part of myself. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Because it's never really been like welcomed,
Okay.
But I do think I get emotional because I care.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's interesting because I don't feel like I feel like it makes other people uncomfortable. So again, I appreciate you inviting me to be this way because I feel like sometimes, especially on Instagram, we have to just immediately put this positive spin on it. And do not get me wrong, like I love the people that can do that, but there's also part of me that always wonders, like, is that really how you feel? Because I can't believe that you're just like all of a sudden just skipping to the silver lining. Like, am I the only one that gets emotional? And it can feel like that,
Yeah.
But again, just bring it back to my experience. I think if I just skip to the silver lining, it would be disingenuous. It would not be authentic to the way that I'm actually feeling. And so I would feel incongruent about doing that. So am I going to sit and wallow in this forever? No. Like, I really think it's 2-3 weeks later, like I'm back working out, like it's back to work. Like you can't sit, even if I had have done well, I would like to think that by now I'm just back to work. Like that was awesome. That was super great. I'm proud and happy. But the sun comes up tomorrow, like get back to work, And I think the same can be said for disappointment too. Like I do believe that you need to sit with it, feel it, work through, glean any lessons that you can from it, and just get back to work.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad that I wrote that, and I have returned to it quite a few times because it still feels true to me. It's like I am proud of the training cycle, and the real win was in the training cycle. And the disappointment on race day doesn't take that away.
No, first of all, I think we need more. I think we need to show emotions more, maybe like on social media, all of that. Not well. I think that I read something the other day that we're going kind of numb because we are seeing so many things, like scrolling through things all the time, and then we're just like not really affected by it, or at least we don't think we are. but I think that there is like this expectation that when you're back on your phone and you're writing things, that you're supposed to be reflected, like, like then you're supposed to be wise and take something from it. It's like your stereotypical LinkedIn post, right? This is what the marathon taught me. What has it taught you? Kind of like, this
Yeah.
is what the marathon taught me. Then you write a full thing. What has it taught you? And then the actual, like the true story might be like, I'm still in bed crying over my bad results, but on LinkedIn it says that, so now I'm ready for my next race and I can't wait for this next marathon block. And the last thing you really want to do is go out for a run. And I think that, at least for me personally, I know that there have been times where I'm like, yeah, now I'm just excited to get back, and I'm not necessarily that excited to get back. But I think that maybe, like, I'm a bit of like, at least most of my life, I've been the opposite of what you're saying. I'm not saying that I feel like it's been appreciated. So no, I'm not opposite, because I don't think that it's been appreciated that I've showed all my emotions, but I've not been afraid of showing them.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I've felt that people might be like, oh, it's too much or whatever. But I'm also like, well, it makes it a little. It's predictable and unpredictable all at once. It's like, if he's smiling, he's probably happy. If he's not smiling, he's not happy. That kind of thing. And also maybe a bit too dramatic sometimes, of like, okay, this race did not go well, now I'm gonna quit. And then the next day it's like, hey, I'm back, I'm not quitting after all.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways that's more relatable. I think that a lot of people want to throw their shoes away and never run again after
Mm.
a disappointing race. And then the words or things you see on Instagram is usually just, I think it's more based on what people want, or what we think people want to see. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily what we want to see, because it's more, I just, it's probably mean to say, but I loved when you started crying on your own podcast, because it was just like, okay, this is real. It's not a show you're putting on. You're not, back to what we talked about in terms of the podcast. It's like, you're not just doing this to get more streams on your podcast. You're not doing this because there are people doing it that way. And I think maybe that is also why we sometimes feel like we can't get emotional, right? Because we do see some people taking advantage of it, of like, crying. You might see a headline and it's like, this Hollywood star is like crying, heartbroken over what just happened. That is the headline. And then what it was that, like, her dress got ruined in her dryer or whatever before a big event. And it's like, okay, then sorry, I don't feel that sorry for you about that. Like, I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do think that's something that you worked so hard for so long, that you felt so ready for, as you did. I think it makes sense, and it's okay. And we all know that if something else happened, like bad, really bad happened in our lives, like if something happened to my fiance and I had a bad race, I obviously wouldn't care about that race for a second. Like that,
Right.
I wouldn't. But here and now, right now, that marathon was the most important thing. Like
Right.
that was it, and I think that's okay.
And back to two things being true. I mean, I have full awareness that, and Johnny said this in the podcast too, like, we understand that not finishing a marathon is, in the grand scheme of things, like a pretty luxurious, quote, problem to have. Like, I do get it, and I care, and we're messy and complicated as humans, and we have a wide range of emotions, and why are we only allowed to show the, quote, good ones? Right?
Yeah.
I just sort of push back against that. Like, I'm not going to wallow in it and stay here forever, but if I don't personally, if I don't honor what I'm truly feeling, it just comes out. It just leaks out in other less helpful to more destructive ways.
Hmm.
And that's not good. But to your kind of point about, uh, again, the, I would call it performative vulnerability, like people that
Hmm.
are really trying to, like, that is not what this is. Like,
No.
this is genuine. I wish it didn't happen. I really wish it didn't happen to me. But if I'm going to be out here on a somewhat public platform saying about any of the highs, I just feel very, very strongly that I'm going to also share the lows when they happen. Again, not everybody has to agree with me, but I just feel like I owe it to anyone that follows along to be real.
Hmm. But you told me before that you were almost considering taking it down because you felt so bad about that part,
Or cutting that part out. Yeah.
or cutting that part out. Can you say something more about, and you already touched on this quite a lot, like with the things we just talked about, but I'm still curious, like what thoughts do you have that made you feel that, oh, I don't even want this to be out there? What is it that you're afraid of with that?
Mm. Well, I think it's that I know some people are uncomfortable, like just in the way that I've received feedback about this. I can sort of tell that some people are uncomfortable with it, like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. And, because of this. And it was still that, and it's like, yeah, but I don't know. So I feel
Hmm.
like I'm making people uncomfortable with it. I had somebody reach out and say, like, it's really hard to listen to you because you would never want your athletes to feel that way, and that's 100% true.
Hmm.
I know that if I had an athlete who didn't hit their goals on race day, I sure as heck hope that nothing I say or do makes them feel bad about their performance,
Hmm.
right? So I certainly wouldn't want to make an athlete feel that way.
Hmm.
And yet, maybe am I making an athlete feel that way by being that way with myself? And that's where kind of being a coach can sort of hold up a mirror. I would never, ever, ever treat anybody the way that I've been treating myself
Yeah.
in the aftermath of this. So again, that's where the learning and the growth happens, is um, in kind of learning to work with myself a little bit better when those lows happen. Because again, I'm here for all of it with my clients. Like, I love to be on the ride with them when they have their great days. And I also feel so honored and privileged when they come to me with their disappointments and I sit with them in it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the opportunity for growth for me, is like, it's okay to be with myself and to console myself through this, because that's what I would just do to anyone else. And then it doesn't linger so long, because you're like, wow, that person is unconditionally loving on me right now.
Yeah.
They love me no matter whether I hit my goals or not hit my goals. And in that act of being compassionate, being with that person suffering, then that emotion doesn't linger for too long and they can get back to work.
Hmm. But I think that this is also something that, um, not to shit on people saying like you wouldn't want your athletes to think like this. I think that we're all humans, right? Like we're not perfect, and it's easy for me to say that. So like back to the Strava discussion, like I love Strava. I think it also, like what you said, honestly, touch it kind of also shows that Strava doesn't need to be a public platform. It can still be useful for you, like use it in different ways. But for me, I know that there are times when I'm going out for a run and it's supposed to be easy and the pace is a little bit higher, and but it feels very easy, and I'm like, okay, cool, nice. And then after a few Ks, I'm like, wow, this is gonna look good on Strava. And then so I didn't first half of the run, I didn't really aim at having a like faster pace. But then at the end, I'm trying to maintain that pace because I know that's gonna look good on Strava. And then it might be that the last half was a bit higher intensity than I was aiming at. And I know this. And if I was coaching someone, I would say will be very upset with you if I see any of these numbers. I don't want to see that. And I would say that, but I would still make the mistake in training myself
Yeah.
because we're all human beings. So like,
Right.
and I would kind of flip it and say then, well, coach, maybe you can't be upset with your athletes if you're not able
Right.
to do that. Like, so I wouldn't be allowed to do that. But I think that the athletes should always be also like, well, she's also just a human being. She had this goal that was for her. And you can still be open about that. I wish I talked to myself differently. I wish I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then we do want to have authentic voices on our podcasts. And this is like the last thing I want to touch on because we talked about this before we started recording, that it's a little hard sometimes for both of us, it seems, that we have goals. We are like runners ourselves, and we have other people on, and the way we talk about our own results might make it seem like we're neglecting or looking down on other people's results. Not because we do, but it's just that you are comparing your time with yourself. I'm comparing my time with my previous times. And so maybe this is the biggest challenge as a podcast host, because people will kind of put us on a pedestal in a way. We're like, but you're supposed to be inclusive. You're supposed to include everyone. And will you say something about this? Because I know that you had some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. And I think maybe back to what you were just speaking about is we're all human, and these are messy human emotions to deal with, right? And I feel very strongly in terms of what I've received in since this, I feel very strongly that it actually doesn't have anything to do with your running times. These emotions that I'm like talking about, they've related as much to middle and back of the pack runners as they have. I've had front of the pack runners reach out too. I think this is just across the board relatable, because no matter how fast you are, I think everybody can relate to, I set a goal, the goal, reflected some kind of, value to this arbitrary hard work I put in and day out. And I didn't hit it, and it sucks. Like, I think
Exactly.
I am very aware, and I never want it to come across that I think I'm better than anybody or worse than anybody. Like, that's what I kind of love just in general about running, is that we're all doing it in a very similar way a lot of the time, right? No matter how fast we're actually doing it. And I think that's what brings us together, and probably was, to be honest, the motivation behind sharing the goal in the first place was to show that, hey, you're trying to break 4 hours in the marathon. I'm trying to break 3:20 in the marathon. And hey, you're trying to break 2:40 in the marathon. We're all kind of doing the same thing.
Yep.
And let's go on a journey together. Let's explore everything that comes up for us on that journey. And guess what? A lot of people can relate.
Yeah. And I think that is also, I really hope that when I have guests on, and I'm sure you feel, or I know that you feel the same way because we talked about it, that we don't want the guests to feel like we're not being authentic or honest when we're saying, wow, that's a good time,
Yeah.
because I will say that to someone who did a 5:05 marathon or a 6-hour marathon. I'll be like, that's great, and it could be, I don't know this, but it could be that some people are like, well, he or she, they're not being honest now or real when they're saying that, because she's a 3:21 marathoner, he's a 2:47 marathoner. But the thing is that when I started running marathons, like when I did my first marathon, I wasn't, like when I was on the start, I wasn't worried that I wouldn't finish that marathon. Like I knew that I have an athletic background. I've been training for like my whole life, and I know that I'm gonna do that. But the question is like, how fast can I run it? Can I reach my goal?
Mhm.
So that is my starting point. And then you have some people who have, like, they've been sick, or they have been much bigger, they lost some weight, or maybe the marathon is even just like their first step in starting to change their lives somehow. And with that, then it is very impressive with what they are doing, because it's all compared to where they are, not compared to where I am. So I'm not looking at my time, looking at this person time, and I'm like, oh wow, like from my point of view, as like from a 2:47 marathon perspective, that is a great time. Like I'm not seeing it as you are a potential 2:47 marathoner. I'm seeing it as you are on your journey, and I'm very impressed with what you did. Like I had
Yeah.
Herm runs on, who uh, is like, he's been such a great front figure for bigger runners, as he says himself, and just like running shirtless and not being afraid of doing that. And I just love his story about actually being, or thinking that his girlfriend would die when she did her first half marathon or marathon, because he thought that that was not good for you. Like he actually, he wanted to be there because he thought she would die. And then he watched that New York City marathon and it's like, next year I'm going to do this. And he was the most unhealthy person like at the time. And then he just changes his life, and now he's running every day. That to me is more impressive than anything. And I
Mhm.
really hope that people believe me on that. But I don't
Yeah.
know if for you, if you find it hard sometimes, because even when I say this now, I'm afraid that people are like, oh, he's saying that to kind of greenwash his podcast in some ways, like
Yeah.
make it look
Yeah.
better. And that I
Well,
find difficult.
yeah, I hear you. And actually in the recap episode, I struggled to share the part about my decision to DNF, because could I have finished the race? Absolutely. I could have finished the race. Jogging it in, whatever. Like it still would have been hard. Like don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. A marathon is just, I've run a marathon in all sorts of different ways, as many people have. And like in the pandemic, I jogged a marathon. Like I told you I went out to really go after it. I don't know why I did that at all, but like, and then I ended up DNFing, and then I felt so guilty about it that 2 weeks later I went out and I was like, I'm going to finish this marathon. So I'm like, just jog it, just go for it. And I still couldn't believe how hard it was. I ran a 3:39, and I'm like, man, like even jogging it at an easy pace for me is still so hard. Like marathons are just hard. So I say that from the position of very much understanding in my bones how hard a marathon is, no matter what way you do it. But this particular race for me, I was very clear on the goals and intentions going in, and I was chasing my personal best. Like we can sit here and argue, like, or not argue, but it was that, should I have done that? Was that the best thing to do? Like marathons, you don't know how you're going to feel on the day, so maybe time goals maybe aren't the greatest, and maybe I will rethink that and bring a different approach to my next one. Sure. But on this particular day, there was a mission.
Yeah.
And when it was like very, very, very clear that that mission was not happening on that day, I just didn't feel like it would serve me in any meaningful way to finish. And I say that with all the love for anyone who feels strongly about never DNFing a marathon. I know there are people out there like that. I love you. For me, I did not want. I don't need to go out and prove that I can finish a marathon. I already know that with
Hmm.
everything that I have. I know that. Um, I wanted to say I really, again, back to the whole injury prevention thing and my former life as a physiotherapist, I'm like, it's hard on the body to run a marathon.
Yeah.
And if I'd even slowed down to a jog and finished it, like that would have prolonged my recovery to kind
Exactly.
of get back into things and go after Boston. And I just weighed the pros and cons, and that didn't feel worth it. So all of this, like I really hope that my platform comes across as a very inclusive space. Like I just love the running community and um I love the people getting into it and dipping their toe in it for the first time and the people that are performing at the highest level and everybody in between. Like I just hope that um and truly when I like I reached out to somebody who ran Houston yesterday, the Houston half. Again, it's not even somebody that I know very well, just like a follower, but she ran a beautiful, amazing race. Um, I'm somebody who really loves like a well executed race, and
Mm-hmm.
I can see that like when you look at splits on somebody, or and especially if you know them and you kind of know what they're capable of, if it was like even at the edge or something like that, but they held it together and maybe they executed a tiny negative split at the end. I am always here for a well executed race like that. So I'm not being disingenuous when I reach out and say, wow, that was the best executed race of all time. Way to go. And was she slower than me? Yeah. But I
Mm-hmm.
have just as much like um I'm just as impressed because she went out and ran her best race.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like for what it's worth, I don't think it comes across as anything but that on your platform. Like
I'm glad to
your
hear that.
genuine love for the running community shines through.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. So then, are you able, like, honestly, when you look at it, because 3:21:55, that's your personal record in a marathon, which to most people is an incredible time. Like you and I are both in the running community, so we do see a lot of other runners. The runner that you referred to just did a sub 2:30 marathon, right? And so if you compare yourself, or the comparison game that we talked about, it's hard. But are you able to still kind of look at it from the outside, and now I want a very honest question to say it's a good time?
Yeah, I do. I think I can see that that's and maybe this is a unique position that I sit in the running community too, is that I'm not so good that I'm intimidating to people, but I'm also faster than a lot of people. So I feel like just because of the where I sit sort of time-wise, I get to know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not and I just put this out too yesterday on my Instagram. Like one thing I'm going to get even more intentional about with this build into Boston, because it's over the winter, like not my favorite time of the year to run. I'm very intentional now with like really immersing myself in the running community and connecting with people, like
Yeah.
really connecting with people, because I love that about the podcast. I love that about Instagram, but it's just so much better in real life to
Mm-hmm.
be connecting with people that way. And I've had some people reach out like, I don't know if I'm like fast enough to run with you. It's like there's actually probably nobody that I can't run with.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you're too slow to run with me, maybe we run on a day that you're doing a little fartlek workout or something like that we can make it work, right? And my husband's super fast, but I'm his coach and I write his training in a way that kind of benefits me sometimes, where I'm doing marathon pace and he's out for an easy run. There's a way for me with where I sit with my running time to almost be able to run with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a cool place to be. We might have to get a little creative in the way that we do it, but I can't wait. I can't wait to connect with all kinds of people, and hopefully a run in person will, if they're skeptical at all about my intentions, like they will know that I just genuinely, you run, I run, we have this in common and we can get along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I kind of want to, like, now that we're getting to the end of our conversation, I might actually end up or I to the people listening to this, they're listening now to part 2. I'm gonna make this into 2 parts, I think.
Cool.
But we talked about your podcast in the beginning of the episode, and one thing that I was thinking about, and this, it could be that it's very intentional, or it could be that it's me not being a native English speaker. But is it very intentional that it's souls? So, like, obviously undershoes, but also as a soul. Is that something that, and how often do you feel like people are not necessarily misreading that? I'm going to be honest with you and say that I haven't really read it that many times. I've only listened to it. So I always thought it was inspired souls.
Like
As in,
SOULS.
yes.
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 Very intentional. That was
Yeah.
intentional.
And I think it's great because I thought that was a great name, just that. And then, like, reading it and like seeing it with the logo, I was like, oh, obviously. But then I was like, oh, it is probably both in some ways.
Yes.
So first of all, great name. So really good on your part there. Can you say something about like the thought process behind that?
Yeah. Well, I can't take all the credit for this one. As I mentioned before, I began this podcast with a co-host, Kim Sankey, and she and I, it was funny. We both wanted to start this podcast. We're both physiotherapists. We know nothing about this world. And so we did a lot of research beforehand. Like, I listened to a podcast series called How to Start a Podcast, and I literally we followed the steps. We met together and worked through any assignment or whatever that was given. But the coming up with the name part was one of these assignments. And I should show you the list. We probably had 50 potential names. And they were very close to Inspired Souls. Like, we were on that track for a long time, but I can't remember if it was her, if it was me, but just one of us was like, well, what about Inspired Souls? Like, just that double like meaning with the souls and just sort of what we wanted to get out of it. Even the word inspired, like, I think it's comes from a Latin, and I don't speak Latin, so I don't know, but it's like to breathe life into something is like inspire or something is like what it is in Latin. And it means to breathe life into something. And I'm like, wow, like, how cool is that? And so there was a lot of intention with inspired and the souls having the two meanings that went into us just both being like a great big hell yes to, yes, this is it. Like, we know that this is the name. This is for sure the name, but it wasn't right away. It took, that was several meanings. That was a Word document that had, no joke, 50 different potential names. Yeah. So thank you nobody's ever asked me about that.
Yeah, because that was actually going to be my next question. I'm curious, if you were to do like a survey of some sort, how many people, if they haven't like read it, how many people have just thought about it as SOUL, and how many have, because it's to me, I just thought that was great. But I also remember that when you first reached out to me and like I was checking out, or we were talking about it, I was like, well, that is also a bit weird that it's not like anything running related in the title of the. But then I was like, oh well, yes, so so obviously, I'm sure that for me too, coming from being a Norwegian and not speaking, like, now I speak English every day, but not being a native, then it's easier. The soul word SOUL is a word that I've used more than like my shoe sole. so I think it's interesting, but also great title for a podcast.
Thank you.
And then the last thing I want us to touch on, and that was, I didn't plan on doing that, but we talked about it before we started recording, and both of us, we have podcasts, we have things that, like, you were a physiotherapist before, like you said, you're not practicing that anymore, but you almost feel like you, if correct me if I don't quote you right here, but you said that you don't really feel like you belong because you don't have that like 9 to 5 job, and you don't really have that, call it normal life that a lot of people have, especially like work wise. Will you just say something about like what do you mean when you say that you don't belong because of that?
Mm, okay, yeah, good question. And again, nobody's ever I've never explored this with anybody before, so forgive me if my thoughts aren't crystallized here, but yeah, I tried to do the 9 to 5 thing. I mean, I trained as a physiotherapist and worked as a physiotherapist in sort of the conventional jobs, hospitals, clinics from when I graduated in 2003 to I think my last day was in 2012. So over a decade or like about a decade in physiotherapy. And back to the soul, the word soul, I found I found it kind of soul sucking, to be honest.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me. I'm not sure if it was the actual practicing of physiotherapy or more the 9 to 5 of it all, but I just felt again, I'm a feeling kind of person and I just didn't feel like I was on the right path. Like I worked hard, um I saved like my husband and I were both working at the time. Our first child was born in 2007, so there was some of that time we were both working, like what we would call dinks here in Canada, double income, no kids. It was great, and I'm very, I guess, disciplined at like saving money and investing and stuff like that. So I knew that if and when we had a child, I wanted the freedom to decide if I like had to work or if I could work part time or if I needed to work full time or whatever. So we saved, we invested, I got I'm again, I'm a disciplined person. I'm like, I got excited paying down my mortgage. Like I like these kind of things. And we still had fun and traveled and did things, but I just wanted to put myself in a position where I didn't have to do a 9 to 5 if I didn't want to. And to make a long story short, that's like it's worked and I don't have to do a 9 to 5 and I love it. I love that every day of mine I'm still being of service, I'm still contributing, I'm still passionate about things and get to explore those, but I'm not beholden to going to work. I don't need the structure of like going to work to get myself to do things
Yeah.
actually. Like I again, more of a self-starter that way, I guess. But I love that, I have like no 2 days are the same. It's always different. It's always flexible. If I want to go on, the class trip with the kids or whatever, I can do that if I know about it in advance. So I kind of see it that we made decisions a long time ago that set us up for the life that we're living right now. My husband, again, same thing, but he loves his job. He loves his job as an officer in the military, and he kind of can't imagine not having that. So it kind of works for us too, where I'm kind of like he travels a lot. He's away right now, so he can just easily up and go. And I've like got the home front taken care of and the kids and all of that kind of stuff. But I need my own purpose and my own things to explore too. And that's sort of where the podcast and coaching and everything has come in. So again, I appreciate being able to talk about that because it's not something I get asked about too much, probably because I don't talk about it. I sort of feel sometimes a bit guilty, as I was saying to you, and maybe was the question in the first place. I apologize. That I see people that do work the 9 to 5 and struggle and hate it and wish that they could be doing something like I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, you probably could, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I know not everybody can either. So that's maybe the part that makes me feel guilty. I'm not sure.
But I think it so like for me at least, in some ways it makes sense that you feel guilty because it's like you're not doing what everyone else is doing, and like there might be comments, questions, whatever. But um so for me at least, and I don't know if you have experienced the same, I get a lot of um, questions for people like, how are you able to travel this much? And now I'm not talking about the expenses of travel. I'm just talking about the freedom of doing it, because there's a big difference between that. I think that to a lot of people, and I even got a comment the other day because I was telling someone how many marathons I'm doing next year, and she was like, "Well, oh, you must be rich." It's like, no, I'm not rich, but I do have the freedom to work from anywhere, and
Mhm.
so there are some places I can actually go where some of my clients are based, right? Like some of my clients are based in Australia. So as long as we have all visa stuff figured out, then I'm good to go. Like I can go there. And so I can actually both expense it and make money doing the Sydney Marathon. So that
Mhm.
is like, and that is obviously something that I'm not necessarily sharing. I'm not like telling people, hey, I'm going to Sydney and this is how I can afford it. That is not like
Right.
my Instagram strategy. And I get a lot of questions on that, like how can you have that freedom? And that is something that I really really appreciate. And I am also very open about the fact that yeah, I've built a business where the model is in a way where the product is usually good enough that if I work for a couple of days, that might sustain like a month, or at least, like I don't have to worry too much about it. But I've never had that feeling of guilt that you're explaining. I'm more
Mm.
like, I'm very lucky. I'm very happy about this. And I do not understand why more people aren't trying to pursue the same things. And that also might come off as arrogant of like, oh, everyone can, build their own thing. But I think goes back to what you were saying about you want that structure. You want to have those things like with the podcast, you have goals, ambitions. And for me, that has just like always been a part of me. But I guess it's more that uh, I'm choosing to do this. And like I told you before we started recording, although it might take me 1 or 2 days to shoot a wedding and go back, edit those photos, and be done with it, it's still taken me years and years and years of learning how to do that. And there's so much risk involved because if I'm not doing a good job, I might lose clients. If I'm not doing a good job, they might even be like, we're not paying you for this because it's not good enough. So I need to bring my A game every day. And those are like, that is like the downside to that. It's not as secure. I
No.
head into 2026, I have the best year ever behind me, like on my business, but I still don't know what 26 is going to be like. It's
Exactly.
unpredictable, and you
Yes.
could say that a good year will most likely give you another good year, but that's the same with like marathons, right? Like if I ran a PR yesterday, I might get injured tomorrow, and I might not be able
Exactly.
to run the rest of the year.
Yeah. Uh,
So
s-
yeah,
well, I think perhaps the reason that you're getting people curious and asking you is because I think a lot of people do want that location freedom that you were
yeah,
talking about, the time freedom, the ability to travel and work from anywhere. Like we're recording on video right now. You're not in your usual setup
no,
that I can see, but you have your professional podcasting mic, and I've done the exact same thing before, and you would never know, listeners, but I'm recording from somewhere else, and I just packed my microphone.
hmm
And so I think people are curious from the sense of like, wow, there's like, I don't know many people taking this path. Can you tell me how you did this? Because I would love that. And yet at the same time, because again, two things can be true, the unpredictability of that kind of a life, like, yeah, the upward potential might be higher in when working for yourself, but there also might be months where you don't get paid, and some people can't handle the unpredictability of that, because
Mhm.
that is more stressful. Like, there
Oh, yeah.
is a
Yeah.
predictability in going to work and knowing every 2 weeks I'm going to get this paycheck and everything. But the upward potential with a job like that might not be the same as working for yourself. So again, I find I should have somebody on the podcast to explore this, like the amount of people who choose to run, because let's face it, running is not easy. We're diving in head first, being like, I want to do this hard thing. I would be curious the number of folks inside of running, if it's a higher percentage of folks that also are entrepreneurs,
Oh, yeah,
right?
that's very interesting. It was in Life in Stride. I think it was Scotty, one of the hosts there. I'm pretty sure he said, and he listened to something, and he said something about like that most successful full people run. There was like
Yeah.
something about that. And then you can obviously define success. So I think that in this case he was talking business, but I do think that there's something to that. But I also think that it could be a little bit the opposite if you, because my approach to it is also that my job started getting boring. Like that is why
Mm,
running ended up being so much fun, because
right.
I finally got to be ambitious again. And that's the thing, that I'm not worried about my business in 2026 not being good enough for me to get my salary really. Like I'm probably good for that. So it's not challenging in that way. It's more that um if I go to, now that I have a podcast, I can expense more of the things, because like I can justify that I have income on running, so I can also then expense a trip to Japan to run the Tokyo Marathon. But I still need to have the means to do that. So it doesn't help if I can expense it if I don't have the money to do that. And then I
Right.
have like my salary and all these trips on top of it that I need to kind of expense. So
Right.
that is like where my doubt comes in, I guess, where it's like, okay, can I sustain this for as long as I want to, all the things I want to do? The Marathon Podcast sponsorship, can I still be like, okay, I'm going to spend another 15, 20,000 in 2026 on athletes, because that's a big expense. But I still think that for me, it just ended up being like, this business is not challenging. I probably am the person that you described that's like almost thrives when I'm not sure if I'm getting my
Right.
salary next month. It is stressful. I do not want to go back to that time when I had like, okay, we're not paying ourselves salary this month. Like I started the company with a UK photographer, and he was like, or British photographer, I guess you say. And I remember we had a couple months where we couldn't pay ourselves, and that was
Hmm.
stressful. But I
Hmm.
still, that's where I really was, grinding and really working hard. And then I got to a point where, okay, now it's comfortable. Like it's pretty steady. And then I found running, and then I'm not sure if I will ever feel like, oh, now I'm happy. Like I will
Right.
always try to get better. And as long as I then have running, kind of back to what you were saying about who is it that is running, I think that if you are bored at work and you like, okay, it's safe with a 9 to 5 job. I want to like use my ambitions, all my, I will want to have my goals somewhere. Maybe running is that place.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's so interesting. And I think it just goes back to a theme threaded throughout our conversation so far, is just you got to know yourself. You got to understand what's driving you, your why, all of
Yeah.
those kind of fundamental questions that can seem existential to some people, like, but
Hmm.
you can't, because the what you might tell one person, like some two people can present completely identical on the outside, but what might be driving those behaviors on the inside could be completely opposite.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question, and that is kind of like on this topic still, but ending the podcast with that. You used the word not belonging when you were talking about this before, right? So like one thing is feeling guilty, the other part is like not belonging. And I can understand that because you don't have a 9 to 5 job, so you are then different. But is that, and why is it difficult for you to not be long in that way?
Mm. Whew. Now, talk about an existential question.
No, but the reason I'm asking, I'm gonna explain it, and then you can think while I'm saying that. The reason I'm asking is that I think, I mean, it probably comes back to what we were talking about in terms of standing out, like that pink suit. I like that I have a different story. I
Mm.
like that when people ask me what I'm doing something different than everyone. Like this weekend, we were at that wedding. People are like investment bankers. They are working like really corporate jobs, higher ups, right? Like great people, really successful. And they're like, "So what are you doing?" And like, "I'm a photographer and filmmaker." And everyone's like, "Oh, cool," because they don't really see that a lot. But I love to be that one that is different. So to me, it's like that feeling of not belonging just makes me feel better about myself. But I also but that is in some ways, like if I felt like I don't know, if I felt like they were looking down on me because of it, it probably would have been different. But I don't get the impression that they are. Like, at,
No.
luckily, we have nice people around us, so they're not looking down on my profession.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is why I'm asking, because you said it in a way where it made me feel like that it was almost a bit difficult. But for
Yeah.
me, it's like it's kind of my superpower.
No, that's really cool and very interesting that you picked up on that difference. So let me try to unpack it. I think when people ask me what I do and I say that I'm a podcast host and a running coach, it might not be true, but I get the sense that they're like cool, like that's different, right? I'm not the investment banker. You can't picture my day to day really as well as maybe more conventional jobs. But I also feel like there's this, and I might be wrong, but this wonder of like, how do you make money doing that?
Hmm.
And I think maybe the part that I struggle with is that I don't really make money doing that. And I feel like bad about it. like, because I'm just like, how do you make money with a podcast? You got to sell a lot of stuff, right? You have
Yeah.
to have a lot of like ads and I just feel so strongly about not peddling things to people that they don't need. I'm very like minimalist kind of person. So I'm going to have to really believe in something to be advertising it on the
Hmm.
podcast. And I have brought on my first sponsor, which is Lever, and
Hmm.
I legit genuinely love this thing. Like it's helping me to add more mileage and while staying healthy and stuff like that. It helped tremendously in my marathon. Um, so I feel good and congruent. And if I can get more things like that, I would be happy to advertise things, but I don't want to just advertise things for the sake of
Yeah.
advertising things. And so I haven't really pursued a lot of bringing on partners and things like that. And then I think people's questions of like, how do you make money makes me realize, oh, I'm still
Yeah.
procrastinating on monetizing the podcast. And I feel kind of bad about it, that I still am just doing this as like a hobby kind of thing.
But
But
do you think that it comes from that fact then, that it's not so much about what you're doing, but how you got to where you are financially almost?
yeah, I think. I think.
Because to me, like listening to this, and I'm not gonna ask you to open up like about your finances, but based on all the things you said, it seems like you were really smart. You did very well, like before you had kids. You bought a house, like paid down a lot on your mortgage. It's like, so you kind of just made a perfect setup for yourself,
Yeah.
right? Or yourselves. And most people will be jealous of that. All, regardless of them being investment bankers or not, they will probably still be like, okay, I make a shit ton of money, but I still have a lot of loans or mortgages, like, things like
Right.
that. And so in some ways it's a subtle brag to be able to be like, yeah, but I don't really need to make money on these things. I just need to have something that I'm filling my days with, that I'm enjoying, right? And so
Yeah.
it I see where you're coming from, but it's almost, at least to me, I'm like, well, that sounds pretty perfect.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think, now we're really touching on some things here. I think that's what it is. Like some of the most, I'm going to use this word existential again, but like moments in my life have come from getting absolutely everything that I've ever wanted. Like when I was working for that, like paying down the mortgage and saving money and learning to invest and all of that kind of stuff. I'm like, because then I want this freedom later on. I want to be able to pursue passions. I didn't know about podcasting at that time, but I always had like, I wish I could just I don't want to just sit on the beach all day. Like I still want to contribute and do things, but I just want to do things kind of on my terms. Like that was
Mhm.
always kind of the end goal when I was saving and paying down the mortgage and all that stuff. And then when I finally got there, I felt like, oh boy, I can't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I had trouble. So it again, the existential part is that anything that I've ever like worked for and then finally got has never felt as satisfying as I thought it would, because I think this underlying self-worth piece, am I good enough? Do I deserve whatever, is at the heart of what's always kind of been the biggest thing standing in my way.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
but
when I hear people maybe like, oh, wow, how do you pay for stuff? And I'm like, gosh, like you could do it too. Like I want to help. Like I don't want to be people's like, I don't want to manage people's money or anything like that. But I'm just like, I think more people could do it than realize than they realize. Like I think people sometimes stay stuck in a 9 to 5, maybe longer than they have to when they don't like, because I don't find it that difficult either. Like I enjoy saving money. I like investing money. I like sharing it. I like giving back. Um, and I think more people could do that too. So I feel sometimes like there's this judgment on people that make money. And I think there's some egregious things happening with some like rich people in the world, right? Like
Mhm.
you look at Donald Trump, or like, not to get political, but I'm like, oh boy, he's giving people that have money like a really bad name, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But I don't think everybody's like that.
No. And I think it's very interesting that all the things you're touching on here, uh, also in terms of like, if we were to bring it a little bit back to the running perspective on, because I think that so many people are like, oh, I wish I had more time to run, right?
Mhm,
And even if you were not, say, pursuing uh like a career as an entrepreneur or anything like that, but you just were like, oh, it would be nice if I could tell my boss that I only want to work 4 days a week because
yeah.
I want to run more. And maybe the 4 days a week would look more like working shorter days. So you still work 5 days, but you have shorter days or whatever. So you have more time to run. And I'm sitting here and like I have a business that's doing fairly well, but I'm still like very jealous of the things you're saying, like in terms of making that setup for yourself, like early on, setting yourself up for success, like you and your husband, it seems like. And I think that most people will actually be jealous of that. And so whenever you feel like you don't belong, if I were for you, like I would be like, well, this is a pretty perfect setup. Like if something happened, at least we don't need to worry about paying these monthly bills because you have probably less monthly bills or smaller monthly bills than maybe I do or someone else does, right?
Mhm,
And,
mhm,
and those are things that you won't see. You see the big cars, you see the big houses, you see the fancy stuff, but you don't see the balance on like the bank account or
mhm,
what dent that made to get that car, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and that's not to say that it's like not okay to get that big car. Like I see some cars every now and then. I'm like, oh, I wish I could have that. Like maybe one day we can have that. Like that's, and I think that's how it's always gonna be. But I maybe you don't belong, but like in the way where you have actually just stood out and done some things that most people are not aware of or not courageous enough to do at a younger age. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh,
No, and I don't like you just said maybe people are jealous, and I hate thinking that anyone is jealous of me. Like I'd rather like show people like here's how you do it. Like I'm a
yeah.
total open book. I'll show you what I did, you know?
Hmm.
Um I
Maybe
don't like
envious is a much better word
envious
to
maybe. Yeah.
use. I think that like jealous has probably gotten much more of a negative
Mm,
load to it, but um, I at least for me, yeah, I don't know. I use jealous, and that could be that I'm a Norwegian, and that's why I'm using it. But I'm not always seeing jealous as a bad thing. It's like I can get some of those same feelings, and yes, maybe also like actually it is the right use of the word. Like I'm jealous, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could have that. Why did she have that, and I did not? You know, like. But then I think that the difference for me, at least, is that I'm always trying to pretty quickly turn that around from being jealous to acting on it and not being like, you
right.
know, upset that someone else has something that I don't. So, and I think this is something that I'm feeling every day with a marathon distance. I'm seeing people running really fast, and I am jealous. Like I'm not gonna hide that.
Uh-huh.
It's
Uh-huh.
like Chris Sadler, one of the first guests that I had on the podcast. He ran a 2:35 yesterday in Houston, and really good. Like broke. It was his first time sub 240 and ran a 2:35. Amazing, right? And I am happy for him, and I mean that. I am happy for
Mhm.
him because he's a grinder. He had a bad race earlier this year, and it's just like I'm genuinely happy for him. But I'm also jealous because I wish that it was me.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't take long before I'm like, well, I'm also on the path, like working
Yeah.
to get there. And who's to say I'm not getting there? And it's not that long ago that he was at the level that I am at now. So he's kind of just showing me that it's possible. Uh,
Totally. Yeah.
so I think the jealousy is not bad if you can turn it into something. If it ends up being a negative thing that you're like, oh, I don't like this person, then it's probably not the best.
Right.
But uh,
And maybe that's what's underneath it. I'm like, I don't want anyone to not like me. Like I
yeah,
want you to know that I would help you and like if really so when you feel envious or jealous of that guy and then it's I don't think the feeling of jealousy is bad. It's totally neutral. It's totally human to feel jealous. It's what you then do with that,
exactly. That's what I think is the
right?
most important thing. So it's not jealousy doesn't need to be bad. It's
Yeah.
just how you act on it, right? And I think that's the same with most things. It's
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, you could to to do it, make a very simple comparison. It's like if you see someone who has a very nice watch, you won't just run over and steal that watch. You will just start thinking like,
Right.
what can I do to get myself the same watch? Whether it's
Yes.
like just finding the store or actually finding the money to buy it. So um, it's
And I think maybe just to expand on this a bit more too is that there's nothing more like if someone has something that I want, right? And I'm jealous of them, uh I will tell them like
yeah.
wow, I like that's amazing. Like tell me what you did. Like let's have a conversation about it. I think there's no better place to be as that person than to
Hmm.
for someone just to not hate you because you have what they don't want, or hate you because you have what they want and don't have. Um but to enter into a conversation about it and give them advice and all of that like that feels better as the person who potentially has something that somebody else wants like
Exactly.
don't just hate me for it or
No.
think like must be nice or any of those types of
Yeah.
things so maybe the guilt again I'm really just working through this here it's like because I never want to be seen like that I think there's like an underlying like the feeling like I'm not gonna belong is just this worry that people are gonna hate me because of having things that they want when really I can't control what anybody thinks. And Emily Infeld just put something up on her Instagram yesterday, and I reached out to her to ask her to come on the podcast to talk about it because I just thought it was so good. It was like people are just going to judge.
Yeah.
Like they're already judging you
Yep.
for stuff.
Yeah.
We can't control what people think. So really, the person we should be trying to impress the most is ourself. And if I'm being really honest, I'm totally fine and happy with the way I'm conducting my life if I'm just trying to impress myself. And so I carry on.
I love that. And just to kind of conclude and I think it's a great way to end it this episode, because I think that to some people, if they're listening to this, they're like, oh, now it all of a sudden turned into like a business self-help kind of thing. But the thing is that you can use this for anything, like everything. And I think that especially with running and mileage, because that's where I've maybe struggled the most of seeing that. I don't feel guilty, but because of my athletic background, I have the muscle memory, so I'm getting back pretty quickly. And so if you look at my marathon times and compare it to people who are also running the same times and the mileage and how much I've been running, I'm running much less. I did not really want to post how many miles I've logged in 2025 because it's not been that many compared to a lot of them. So, or a lot of others. But I think that is like what we're talking about here, is that we have such different, like what works for me might work very, very well for me, but it might not work for you. And being jealous of someone who's able to run 100 miles a week compared to me, like peaking at about 70 miles a week, I'm like, okay, so instead of just being like, oh, it's so unfair, blah, 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 be like, okay, so what can I do? So maybe lever, is that what it's called? What you were talking about? Maybe that is the solution to getting there. Creatine, like all of those things, or more sleep. If we look away from supplements to just like being better at things, but looking at yourself, asking yourself, what can I do, and not just let that jealousy live too much, I guess. Yeah.
Wow, we went all over the map.
We did. This is we've been talking for 2 hours and 16 minutes now, so it's definitely going to be 2 episodes. I just want to thank you again for being so open, Carolyn, and for everything that you shared today. It was great. Really, really appreciated the conversation.
Likewise, thank you so much for asking me on to talk about this. Again, it wasn't a subject I was loving to be so public about, but now that it's happened, I think it's really invited some rich conversations with people, and this one for sure is up there. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and see you in Boston.
See you in Boston.
Thank you so much to Carolyn for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate that. I hope that we can link up in Boston, maybe do a live pod. Can't wait to meet in person. And Carolyn, you are a badass. 3:21 marathon, that is fast. And all the structure, all the training, everything that you do with your discipline, it all just amazes me and impresses me. So keep being you. And thanks again for guesting the podcast. And to you for listening, thank you so much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And remember that you can get 20% off a subscription with Strava by using the code Christian, or see the show notes for the code. See you in the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wallet Studio.